Hello, Widam. This is Leo with One Happy Widow. Thank you so much for joining me live. I know it was short notice, but it usually is because I have trouble planning way ahead. So when the mood strikes and the time is right, we just do the live. If you're able to catch us live today, that's awesome. And if not, you can always catch us on the replay. Either way, we'll be here. So today is going to be a little bit of a tough topic. I've been thinking over it for a couple weeks actually. And I just decided that this is the topic that I'm going to talk about because I've never talked about this topic before. And it's been coming up a lot. It comes up quite often in our Facebook group, and it comes up in my own grief. It comes up in JP, my current husband's grief. He's widowed also. And it's time to talk about it. And it is a tough one. Okay. It's got some conflicting feelings, and it just kind of deals with a lot of complications in our grief. It deals with a lot of guilt feelings in our grief, deals with a lot of judgment from other people in our grief, but it's probably more common than we even like to talk about because it's something we don't really talk about very much in our grief. And we're going to talk about it today. First of all, I want to welcome you to the channel. If this is your first time or you're new, please, just join in if you want to join in on the chat. If this is the replay, then you can feel free to post anything in the comment section down below if you've experienced any of the things that we're talking about. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click on that bell so you won't miss any future videos. And also, I wanted to tell you about our Facebook group. So the channel has grown a lot in the last month or so. So I don't know if some of my videos have just kind of been put in front of more people than usual, but we've had a lot of extra viewers this month. And so that has led to some extra subscribers. And hopefully that's going to lead to some new members in our Facebook group. So I put the link to the Facebook group in the chat box, and I also put it in the description below. But feel free to apply to join our Facebook group. It's full of a lot of supportive people. It's a very positive group. It's very uplifting, supportive, and there's a lot of very smart people that are in that group and very loving, caring people that are in that group. And it's just a really awesome place that I think a lot of people have gotten a lot of help from, not just from me, because I don't get to go in the group as much as I would like anymore because I'm so busy with my job, but we have some um, like some members who've been there for a while who are really good at responding to people who've come in new with their fresh grief and just kind of holding each other up and lifting each other up and just providing support and ideas of things that might work to help us, on this journey that we're all on together. So it looks like we've got Idea Factories waving, watching from my PC now. Awesome. First time to catch a live, Lucinda says, yay. Oh, Nancy, Idea Factory says, Nancy here. And Jonice is back. Yay. Hello. She says, hey, Leo. So I'm so glad that we are able to have a few people on. Some people, it looks like for the first time, and then probably a few of our old standbys that always end up being able to make their way here too. So, okay. So, let's go ahead and just get right down to it. I know usually I do a little bit of a background on what's been going on in my life, but all I'm going to say is that my second daughter, Braylon, turned 21 yesterday. And so she's supposed to come over sometime this afternoon for cake, but it's probably going to be a little while before she gets here because turning 21, she went out with a bunch of friends last night and she probably slept in. That's all I have to say about that. And also coming up this week, my last week of school. Finals week is coming up. I got 5 more days with students and then 2 days after that for post planning. And your girl is going to celebrate real soon. Okay. So we are getting down to the end. Summer vacation is right around the corner. I'm not even going to talk about the struggles I've had on my job because they're about to be ended. So I'm not going to go over any of that. It has gotten rough because the teachers are about done and so are the students. We're all about sick of each other and we're all getting on each other's nerves, but we're all just kind of surviving and trying to make it to the end of the school year. So there's no sense in bringing all of the stuff up if you want to know. So what we're going to talk about today is a recurring theme that just keeps coming up. But, when people pass away, when people die, people say, well, it's not right to speak ill of the dead. Right. And so it almost feels like when somebody dies that suddenly they become this saint. And, nobody's perfect. No marriage is perfect. And sometimes there were issues in the marriage. But suddenly when they die, it's like we're supposed to, put that person on a pedestal and grieve the loss of this great, wonderful person. And it almost seems like, when are we able to think about the parts of them that maybe were not so perfect? Should we even think about those things? Do we need to give time to those feelings? How do we deal with that? It's really confusing, because it's really hard to grieve a person and then also have some negative feelings about their death, or about their life before their death, or about your marriage. And so it's really hard to handle that. And it's something that it's almost like it's taboo to even talk about, because of that whole saying of, well, just don't speak ill of the dead, right? But we're going to talk about it today. So I will say this: if you had the perfect marriage and your spouse never made you mad, and y'all just got along from the moment you got married until the day that they died, then I think that is awesome. And I applaud you. And you're one of the lucky few. And if you are in that situation, then this video may not be for you. It might not apply to you, and it may not have anything to do with you. If that's the case, you probably should just log off, because none of this is going to make any sense to you. And you're going to be like, well, I never had those issues or those problems. But I have a feeling there's not very many people out there who will be able to say that with 100%. And, that's not being judgmental either, but no marriage is perfect. No person is perfect. Every once in a while, you'll hear about somebody that's like, we just never fought. We got along every single day of our lives. We were best friends. We just never had an argument ever, and our marriage was perfect. And maybe that's true for very few people. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there, but I have a feeling for the majority of us, we had our moments with our spouses. And sometimes when we think about those moments, or those things about them that we didn't like, or those things about them that really ticked us off, or just a lot of that stuff, it's hard to know how to feel about that. It's hard to know how to think about that. It's hard to know if you should even talk about those things, but you can't help it, because the memories are there and the feelings are there. And so, where do you incorporate that into your grief journey? So we're going to talk about that now. I don't have the answers, but we are going to talk about it, and we're going to, just kind of explore. And this is going to be one of those where the fact that we're talking about it at all is going to make a lot of people say, okay, good. Finally, somebody's talking about it, because nobody wants to say it. So today's the day that we're going to talk about the thing that nobody wants to talk about, and the feelings that nobody wants to feel and nobody wants to discuss. Right. Ginger says, I'm a school bus driver. I totally get that, right? Like, we are done with school right now. Like, the kids are done, the teachers are done, the bus drivers are done, the lunchroom ladies are done, everybody's done. We're ready for break. So yes, celebration. Yes, Lord. And so Tony says, congratulations, get to end of another school year, Leo. Yes, next year I will be going to another school. But remember, in my other videos, I will not be teaching. I will be supervising other teachers. I will be the department chair, the department leader for the special ed. So I will basically just be overseeing the other teachers. No classes, no students. Yay. So Jonice says, interesting topic. First time here from Norfolk, UK, says Shell. And yes, tell it. Okay. So I did write down a few notes just to kind of keep my mind on track. JP is coming back with lunch. And so, he's going to be waiting in a few minutes. And I usually can't go less than an hour. So we're going to try to do like a 45-minute today. But Leo here is long-winded and tends to babble. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So again, our spouses, we all know this. Our spouses were not saints. Okay. They were not perfect, but nobody is. And that's okay. It's okay that they weren't perfect. The fact that they died does not make them perfect. The fact that they died doesn't erase their faults and doesn't erase their mistakes. But, we kind of have this unwritten rule that, like, you're not supposed to mention their faults after they die, because they're dead, right? So they can't answer for themselves. And so it's like, well, how are you going to speak ill of somebody who cannot defend themselves and their actions, right? I kind of get that, but we still have to deal with those memories. We still are trying to incorporate those feelings in with our grief. And so sometimes it gets hard. And there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt in that. And I'll share some of my own personal thoughts about that and how it's affected me, how it's affected JP, and talk about maybe some stories that I've heard in our Facebook groups and things like that of just situations of other people that they've brought up some things and just how it's affected their grief journey. Lucinda says another done bus driver here too. I don't know how y'all do it because I don't know how you can focus on the road and focus on the kids back there. Hopefully they've got some, some people in there, like some bus driver aides or whatever to try to handle that. I don't know how they work with y'all, but I think they should. Every bus driver should have a second adult in there managing those kids. But anyway, topic for another day. So when you're in fresh grief and you're in that first, let's say 6 months, maybe a year, but I'd say the first 6 months or so, you're in this different phase of grief where, you're having to go through all the legal stuff. You're having to go through everything for the first time. You're really adjusting to this new life and you're figuring out where you're going to live. How's your job going to be? How is your life going to switch to being widowed? There's a lot of changes that could take place. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of thoughts. It is just a chaotic period. The anger in that time frame at your spouse for dying on you is normal. It's a total normal, fresh grief response. And so it's just one of the stages of grief that we go through, being angry. Maybe you're just angry at God because he took your spouse from you. Maybe you're angry at your spouse because they didn't live a healthy life and you always told them to, put that sugar down or, put the cigarettes down or put the, whatever. Like you're always saying, hey, that's going to kill you one day or that's not good for you. And they maybe didn't live a healthy lifestyle and they got some disease and it killed them and you're mad at them for that. Maybe it was something more traumatic, like maybe they took their own lives and you're mad at them for that. So, or maybe you're just mad at the universe in general because you're widowed and you shouldn't be. So there's just a lot of anger that's just built in over the fact that you are living a life that you didn't choose, you didn't want, and you're having to do it anyway. So there's the anger of that. But usually that's a phase of grief or a stage of grief that we go through and then we come out the other side and we kind of morph into something else, whether it be depression or whether it be sadness or acceptance or hope or, all those things that we go through. Usually the anger stage is like a temporary that we go through for a while and then we come out of. But sometimes there's a little bit more to that than just a phase of grief that we're going through about the fact that they died. And so sometimes, we just had a bad marriage. Some people just had a bad marriage. Their marriage had abuse of some sort, or their marriage they just didn't get along like married people do, but they were hanging in there for the kids, or they were trying to make it work and they just had a lot of problems, or they had a lot of money problems, and maybe there was infidelity, or some marriages just suck. Some marriages are great, some marriages are rotten, and most marriages are somewhere in between. And so maybe you dealt with, issues in your marriage, or maybe you were in one of those down parts of your marriage when your spouse died. And so you didn't have a chance to like fix things before they died. So maybe there was a lot of issues in your marriage. Um, like I said, maybe they, made some bad choices, bad life choices that prompted an earlier death than it would because of the things that they did. They didn't work out, they didn't eat right, they didn't live healthy lifestyles, maybe they had addictions and, just all kinds of things that maybe prompted a premature death. And you blame them for that and you're mad at them for that. Sometimes I have heard stories about spouses who their spouse died and then after they died, say they're going through their phone or their computer or their emails, or they met a person later and they found out after their spouse died that they were keeping secrets from them that they didn't know about. Maybe there was an affair they didn't know about, or maybe there was some other skeleton in a closet that they never knew about, that the truth came out after their spouse died. And then they have to deal with being really mad at them and not being able to hash it out with them because they didn't find out until after. And that now you get thrown for a loop because here you are grieving the death of your loved one. And then you found out that they were doing something you didn't know about and keeping a secret. And now you're really mad at them, but you're still grieving them. Um, and so there's so many different situations that could lead to this. And I think that most of us fall somewhere on that spectrum. Like there's always going to be something where we look back and yes, we grieve the loss of our spouse and we are sad about the loss, but there's also going to be those moments where you remember, maybe you just remember some big fights that you had and you get mad at them all over again, and then you feel guilty because you're thinking about some bad stuff. And here you are grieving their loss, but here you are also, thinking about bad memories. And you're like, well, should I even remember the bad memories or should I just ignore them or should I forget about them? Like, how do I deal with those? How do you deal with the bad memories, the negative memories, the bad times, and process through your grief at the same time? Should you even, or should you just ignore it and just push it back in the back and just pretend like it didn't happen? Like, where does all of that fall? Right. And so, another topic to think about is, we've talked about this before about being judged. I have a whole video on that. And so I'll post, if I can remember, I'll post the link to it in the description. I'll change that after the recording. But I did a whole video about no matter how you grieve, you're going to be judged by others. And so if you grieve a bad marriage, or if you had lots and lots of problems that everybody knew about, or your marriage was just in a shambles, or there was just a lot of dysfunction or a lot of abuse or a lot of addiction or anything like that, and your marriage was just shit and everybody knew and you fought all the time, but you were still married, like one of those kind of marriages. If that happened and then your spouse died and then you're crying over him and you're missing him and you're grieving him like a normal person would grieve their spouse, and other people are going to be like, I don't even know why she's grieving him. Like their marriage was so bad. What does she miss about him? Like she's probably glad that he's gone or something. Like in their mind, they're thinking, why is she so upset about losing this guy who treated her like crap? And I know it could be the other way around. It could be the guy who's grieving the wife. I understand that. I usually use the widow term just because 90% or 95% of our audience is widowed women. But I know that it could be, the other way around. But my point is, there's going to be people out there who judge you because you're actually grieving the loss of some guy that everybody knew was probably not the best spouse, probably not the best in the husband department. And they're like, why is she so sad? And you might even be thinking that yourself. Why the heck am I so sad over this? Like, and then you start to grapple with, well, I do miss him, but I'm freaking mad at him, and like that, there is a lot of complication between grieving his loss and, the other feelings, the negative feelings that you had about him. And I'll discuss some of the details in just a minute. But then if you had a really bad marriage or you were in a very dysfunctional marriage and you were still married, but you had a lot of issues and problems, maybe you're not grieving enough. Maybe you're sad, but maybe there was more things in your life that got better after they died than got worse. And I know that sounds weird. I'm not trying to say it's better that they died. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that if you're in a relationship or a marriage where there's a lot of dysfunction, there's a lot of abuse, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of hurt, then the facts are that if the source of that abuse goes away, those parts of your life will improve. Unfortunately, the reason why they improved was because that person died. So it doesn't make the death good. It doesn't make it where you're lucky that they died, but it doesn't take away from the fact that some parts of your life did improve after that source of the pain is not there anymore. And that there's a lot of guilt in those feelings. Maybe you were being super controlled, and you didn't get to have the decisions. You didn't get to make the decisions for yourself like you feel like you should have. When your husband is gone, now you are free to make whatever decisions that you want. That's an improvement in your life. And so you could feel relieved about that. And then you'll probably feel guilty because you feel relieved because your husband died and caused you to have this improvement in your life. So you see how it's all mixed up and kind of jumbled all together. And I have found that after doing a whole lot of these videos that a lot of our feelings in the grieving process are complicated, and they almost always have two sides to them. The bad is sometimes mixed with a little good, and the good is sometimes mixed with a little bad. Relief is usually followed by by guilt. So a lot of times if there's any positive feeling that you feel, when you're in the grieving process, it's almost always mixed with some guilt. Even if you're just moving forward in your life and you have a good day, like the first time you laugh or the first time you smile or the first time you feel positive after your spouse has died, if it's days, weeks, months ahead, but that first time that you like feel a little bit of happiness, usually it's followed with a little bit of guilt because you're like, why am I over here crying? Why am I over here laughing? Why am I smiling? Why did I just laugh at that joke? I'm not supposed to be laughing. I'm supposed to be sad. And then you feel guilty. So, no matter how you go through the grieving process and you move through those phases, it's almost always you move a little ahead and then you take a few steps back. You feel a little bit better and then you feel bad because you felt better. It's always like a mixed bag of emotion, and it's a lot of guilt mixed with a lot of relief, mixed with a lot of sadness, mixed with a lot of hope. And it's just, I think that's one of the hardest parts of grief is that you want to feel better, but you feel bad about feeling better, right? You feel guilty about feeling better. You don't want to have to feel better. You know what I mean? If you're going through it, you know what I mean. And I'm having a hard time verbalizing. Usually I can sort of talk it out, but that one, that's a tough one. That's like a real tough, confusing place to be with those emotions. So let me go back to um, a couple of the comments, and then I'll go back through my notes, and then I'll talk about just a few examples from my own life and from JP's experiences. Holly says, so glad you're covering this topic. This is so needed. Um, I can't remember. Nancy says, summer carpool started for me. Mrs. ATX, I just recently found you. The two parts about Dewey was so real and sincere. 100. Yeah, I think the two videos that I made way back about Dewey's um, his cancer journey and what I did and how things, like our whole from the time he got diagnosed until the time he died. Those two videos, they've been popular, but I think that something happened and they kind of got picked up by the YouTube algorithm recently. And like we've had 700 plus new subscribers in the last month, almost all based on those two videos. And so a lot of people have watched those recently. And that's another thing that has kind of prompted my topic today because, when you have a lot of new viewers, there's always going to be a percentage of them that judge a certain way or, have the negative comments to make. And I don't see them as much anymore. But when there's like 1,000 new views, there's still, then there's going to be more of those negative ones that come in, the judgmental ones that come in that did in the very beginning. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't take him to the hospital that night when he was sick. You're so heartless. And I can't believe you didn't, the judgy kind of things that really bothered me when I first posted the video. And now I'm just like, you know what? You have no idea what I was dealing with in my life. And so go ahead and judge if you want to. Yeah, you got a right to an opinion. But honestly, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a bad person. I wasn't heartless. I was going on the information that I had and I shared that with you. And I'm sorry I couldn't, be like a more perfect grieving pre-widow at that moment or whatever. But like I did what I did based on the information that I had. And a lot, there's people who come back and they're like, I can't believe you did that. But I don't know what to say about it, except for that most of the people who have those comments probably not widowed. And if they are, they probably did not have a like anticipatory grief, where you knew your spouse was going to die and you had to deal with it and figure out how to live with a dying spouse for however long. Until you've walked in that person's shoes, like just don't judge them. You know what I mean? Even if you think it in your mind, it's just not nice. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. Some people who have the audacity to say those kinds of things, I'm like, what purpose do you have to do that? But I realize people are people and it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. So I just say thanks for watching, because anytime they make a comment on one of the videos, guess what? It increases the chances that video is going to be shown in front of somebody else who might actually need to hear it, and it might help them. And so by them making a comment, even if it's a nasty one, they help the channel to progress. So I just thank them for that. So, Ginger says maybe it's more missing the presence than the person. Yeah, I totally can get that. I mean, it very well could be because there's a lot of secondary grief that comes along with the loss of your person. I did another video about that, about primary grief and secondary grief. We talked a lot about that, and it was real eye opening for me when I was researching that. And it made me feel a lot better just finding out what I was finding out to present to you in the video. Um, and then Lucinda says guilt that I didn't take better care of him. So yeah, that's another form of guilt. Like what did you do enough? Did you not do enough? Could you have done things differently? But there's no way that you can second guess what you did during that time. Trust me, because I have gone through all those things, and there's plenty of people who comment on my videos that second guess me, saying, "Why did you do this? Why'd you drive around in an area with no cell phone service on the day he died? Why did you do that?" Or whatever. Like they don't, you know, there's nothing that I could have done to keep him from dying. And I was doing the best that I could do at the time with the information that I had, and that's all you can do. I live in Georgia in the woods. You cannot go more than 5 or 10 minutes without being in a dead zone of the cell phones. Like we go in and out of dead zones, and there's probably 4 or 5 dead zones between our house and the hospice center. So I mean, there's no way I could have driven at all without being in a dead zone at some point. But people want to say that I was driving around in a dead zone on purpose when I got the call that he had died and I missed it, which that's what happened. But I was only in the dead zone for like 10 minutes. So, anyway, getting off topic. Um, let's see. The relief surprised me. Yeah, I think the relief is something that that's what I felt. That was the first feeling that I had when he died, was relief, but not for myself. It was relief that he was no longer in pain. But immediately after that relief, I felt guilt because I felt relieved. Um, Ginger says, Lucinda, yes, even though my mind knows there really wasn't much more I could do, my heart feels like I should have done more or done better. Yeah, there's a lot of survivor's guilt that's involved in grieving, especially when our spouse was sick, or if it was a tragic accident and you feel like, what if I had done anything different? What if I had there's a lot of what ifs, and that's normal in fresh grief. Sue says, hi all, this is a good topic, living with the guilt of not doing enough. Mrs. ATX says, I will say I was shocked when I heard mother-in-law didn't notify you when you instructed to by hospice. I'm so sorry she did that, but you're definitely a resilient lady. I live in North Georgia. And it was BS. Shame on her. Ignore the people that say that. Okay. So I used to live in North Georgia. Which part of North Georgia? I lived in Blairsville, not Blairsville, close to Blairsville. I lived in Morganton, which is right above Blue Ridge. So we lived up there for a little while. Okay. So, and then the last two little topics that I wanted to mention was the guilt. Okay. And I kind of already covered it, but maybe you're feeling some relief. Maybe you're feeling, like you're appreciating some of the things that have changed in your life for the positive since that person has passed away. And then you feel guilt about that. And then maybe you feel guilty about, like I said, that whole adage of don't speak ill of the dead. Like, should you be thinking about the bad stuff? Should you be talking about the bad stuff? Should you even be discussing it? And how does that fall into your grief journey? And then when you have children involved, how much did the kids know about the bad parts of your marriage? How much did they know about their mom or their dad and their issues that they had? And should you tell them about things that they didn't already know? Should you whitewash the memory of them for the sake of the kids, so they don't think that you're just bashing their mom or their dad after they've died? And to me, that's a whole separate issue than how we deal with it. And I do think that we should shield our children from from some of the bad things, because what's the purpose? It is their parent. And sometimes even having a bad relationship with your spouse doesn't necessarily mean that your spouse had a bad relationship with your kids. And you don't want your children to look at you and think that you're bashing the memory of their parent. And so it is our job. It is our job to keep the legacy of our spouse alive, keep the memory of our spouse alive. That is our job, especially for our children. And if we're going to do that in that part of the job of grieving, I do think that we should just keep the positive memories intact, the good things about them, because everybody has Everybody's had some faults, but everybody has good qualities too. And so the good qualities do deserve to be recognized and remembered. And so I'll get into that too. So, um, anyway, and the other thing, I think the other topic that I wanted to talk about was that um, it is okay to grieve even if you had a bad marriage. It is okay to be sad about that person being gone, even if that person was hurting you, even if that person was dysfunctional or was bringing things into the marriage that should not have been there. Um, and maybe y'all both had problems that you brought into the marriage, or maybe you were the victim and they were the perpetrator. It just all depends. But even if that person was doing the stuff that shouldn't have been done and you were totally the victim, it's still okay to grieve them. It's still okay to be sad about the fact that they're gone. And for the main reason is because you know what you lost when they died? You lost any hope that that person would ever change and things would ever get better. Because as long as they're alive and you're married to them, there's still hope that things will get better. There's still hope that that person will change. There's still hope that your marriage will heal. There's still hope that the addiction will be resolved. There's still hope that that person will maybe have their soul saved and have a different outlook on life and realize the pain that they were causing you and decide that they don't want to do that anymore. Like there's always that hope that your marriage will get better because that person will have a change of heart or develop a new lifestyle or come to Jesus or whatever it is that they need. And that if you're still married to them, you've got to still have that hope or else you wouldn't still be married to them. And so when they die, the hope that that's ever going to happen again is gone. Like your marriage will never get better because the marriage is dead. Your spouse is gone and you are no longer married to them. And, you know, that's it. There's no chance that anything's ever going to get fixed. It just ended and it maybe ended on a bad note. Maybe you had a fight and they stormed out and then they died. And then the last thing you said to them was something mean, or something hurtful. That's tough to live with, you know? And so, I guess I just want to put in my little situations, my situation and then JP's situation about how it has affected us and how, it's okay if that's how you're feeling. And it's probably much more common than you think, but since people don't talk about it very much, you might think that you're the only person or that there's something wrong with you or that there's something wrong with the way you're grieving or that you shouldn't be feeling this way or having these thoughts, like you should only be thinking good things and all these kinds of things. If you're not thinking only good things, guess what? It's okay and it's totally normal. You knew that person probably better than anybody else. You knew their faults. You knew they weren't perfect. You can't unremember things, and sometimes the things you remember most are those traumatic events because they burn themselves into your brain and they attach to some traumatic feelings, and it's hard to not remember those things. And even if you try to ignore them, they're not going to go away. And so I just want the main part of my message today is just to let you know that it is a lot more common than you think it is, and that it is okay for you to grieve the loss of your loved one, even if your marriage wasn't perfect, even if your person didn't treat you the way they should have treated you all the time. And even if you do feel some relief over the way that your life has changed and feel that grief. Like it's possible and normal for you to grieve and feel that relief at the same time because it does happen. It's the same thing when you're moving forward and you're trying to find love again. You start falling in love with somebody, you start feeling guilty because you feel like how do you grieve the person I loved and still love and yet have love feelings for this other person. It is possible to grieve and love at the same time, but until you do it, it's really hard to explain how that happens. So people who have not found love again or don't want to have trouble even like reconciling how that is possible. People who've not even lost a spouse love to judge us when we decide to go out and find love again. They're like, "Oh, well, you sure didn't waste any time finding a new guy," or whatever. Some of Dewey's family have said that to me about how quickly I got remarried 2 years after he died. But, it is possible, but it's hard to explain it or put it into words until you're actually doing it or have done it. And so that's when people love to judge you because they have no idea how to even put themselves into your place. They can't understand what you're doing or how you're feeling because they've never done it and they've never felt it. But in a case like that, we should all just, have some grace on each other. Like if you've never experienced what that person's experiencing, you can judge all you want to in your mind, but don't say it. That's just rude. If you disagree with how somebody's living their life, number one, it ain't your business. And number two, I'm sure that that person is dealing with it as best they can. So why make it worse, by insulting them or whatever. And so I'm going to go back to the last few comments and then I'm going to talk about my situation and JP's situation. Then I'll wrap it up. Dawsonville. Okay. All right. So the Z Show says, I want to say thank you for having this channel. It helped save my life after my wife suddenly passed away at 34. She had health issues and was exacerbated by a car accident the week before. Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you're having to go through, and that is such a young age. But I'm glad that you found the channel, and I hope that you have applied for the Facebook group so that you can find some more support because there's a really good supportive group there that can also help you. Jonice says, I still speak with my husband as if he can hear me. I did that for a long, long time. And I would still text him sometimes. Like I texted him for probably a year to a year and a half, maybe. I would just send text every once in a while about like updates on the kids and stuff like that. Just, I don't know. I just felt like maybe the message would get to him somehow in the ether. So have a great day, Leo. Thank you for your positive content. Thank you. Well, that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to put a positive spin on stuff, but I know it's hard to do when this is the topic. I always say, wish you were still here getting on my last nerve, right? Like, yep, you were a pain in the ass, but you were my pain in the ass, and I still miss you, right? So Ginger says, bouncing back and forth between feeling like it was unnecessary to have run to the hospital for every little thing and feeling like it wasn't soon enough is a real struggle. Yeah, that was the issue that I had a lot, even before he got sick, because he was, dude was a hypochondriac, and he was always having some stomach aches and just some gastrointestinal issues. Now looking back, I realized that all that stuff was from his toxic, his toxic exposure in the military that was working on all of his guts and eventually ended up with him having cancer. But I did not know that at the time. And so to me, it was like, he's always having indigestion. He's always having some really bad gas and some really bad stomach aches and gas and indigestion. It was like, my stomach hurts. I need to go to the hospital. I'm like, really? Are you just, it was almost like, if you've ever known somebody who they keep pushing things up for effect because they're not getting the response that they expect. Kids are like that all the time. And so it was like that with him a lot. And I'm like, and so the night that he went to the hospital and found out they had cancer, like I didn't take him. And, people are like, I can't believe you didn't take him and you made his mom come and take him and all that. But it was like the 29th time in a year or two that he had a bad stomach ache and was like, and he would go in and they're like, yeah, you got some gas, dude. Like, or you got some indigestion. Or one time he did have a gallbladder issue, but then they took his gallbladder out. So I'm like, okay, it's not that. Like, this was not something that just like happened for the first time. And then I just let him go. And, I let my dying husband go to the hospital by himself and went back to sleep because I didn't care. It wasn't a situation like that. But people want to spell it out to be that way. That's not how it happened. But hindsight, yeah, he was having a lot of issues and he was dying from it, but I didn't know until he was dying from it. You know what I mean? And so I can't change that. I can't go back and change what I knew or didn't know. Ginger says, my friend Randy is so caught in the guilt. I worry about him a lot. Yeah, the guilt is like a common thing, but it's something that, like, if you watch videos like this, or if you go on a Facebook group where there's a lot of people that have gone through it, it really helps with that. Because once you know that everybody's feeling the guilt and then it's normal, it's like, oh, okay, I'm feeling the guilt because XYZ, and that's a normal thing. It's okay to feel it, but it's also okay to let go of it. Because I feel like sometimes the guilt is like, it's us punishing ourselves for the grief. Like we don't deserve to be happy because our spouse died. And so the guilt is a way of punishing us ourselves emotionally. It's okay to let go of the guilt, but it's hard for some people to do that because they don't feel like they're supposed to or allowed to. And so when you hear about a lot of other people feeling the same way, you're like, oh, this is normal. This is okay. All right, let's move through this together. Um, let's see. Nancy says, I would say in 15 minutes, I will feel differently. So I could just wait for the crying jag to be done. That's a good, yeah. I try to tell my kids that when they're having a really bad day, like, just remember, you're not necessarily going to feel like this tomorrow or the next day, even though you're feeling like this right now. No matter how you feel, whether it's bad or good or indifferent, you won't feel the same way tomorrow or the next day or the next day. All feelings are like on a roller coaster. So no matter what you feel right now, it's not permanent. So that's one way to kind of get through like traumatic mm, moments, I guess you could say. Um, my Meemaw, San Diego, California says, hi from San Diego. There you go. T. Turner says, hi, Miss Leo. My wife passed January 3rd of this year. Your channel has been so helpful. Thank you and God bless you. I'm so glad that the channel has helped because that's the reason why I do it. It's my therapy too. And so for me to talk through things and hear other people say, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. That makes me feel better to know that I'm not the only one feeling a certain way. And so we all just kind of help each other, right? And so Lucinda says, JB, so funny, so true. Yeah. Or when you hear somebody complain about their husband, you're like, well, at least you got a husband to complain about. Like, I don't even have one anymore. So be careful what you complain about because you never know. One day you might not be able to complain because they won't be around to do it. Right. So, all right. Jonice says, got to get the grandkids, catch the replay. See ya. I'm so glad when she's able to get on here. She's even in a different country, and she almost always is able to catch the live. So it's always nice to see some of our regulars pop in, and then it's always nice to see some of the new people that I've come across. So just kind of a mixed thing, but it's always a blessing. So, and what I was going to say about my situation with Dewey is that we did not have a horrible marriage. I mean, we did not have we didn't have infidelity. We did not have addictions. We did not have abuse, those kind of things. We did not have like the big monster things that can really decimate a marriage. So we did not have those things. But, we're people, we're normal people. He had faults. I have faults. He was a great person. He was a great husband. He was a great dad. He was a very patriotic man. And he had his faults. And when he came back from war, he had PTSD really bad and he had some anger problems. And he never took his anger out on us. He never abused us, but it was scary sometimes because he had trouble managing his anger. And it made the kids scared of him sometimes. And it made me think that he was going to end up like beating somebody up or even killing somebody with his own two hands one day into protection of us. And he was going to end up in jail and just a lot of things, and he was he was such a mellow, chill kind of a guy when he left. And he was such a hard, he was, every time we went around to places where a lot of people were, he'd have his hands clenched like this beside him. And he was always scanning and looking around and like assessing the threat. He would always have to sit with his back to the wall. And, like if the kids did stuff that get on his nerves, sometimes he would yell at them a little too loud. And, like I said, he never hit them or anything, but like he was just scary, like he would go from 0 to 100 real quick with yelling and like, his blood pressure was high. And so he was a different man when he came back from the war than he was when he left. And so I had to, I'm getting hot. I had to try to learn how to love this man that came back, who was not the man that I married. He was the same person, you know what I mean? But he didn't seem like the same person. And so there was a lot of things about him that if he had been exactly like that when we first met, I probably would not have fallen in love with him and married him. But I had already married him and knew that who he was on the inside and had children with him and things like that. But there was just things, that it was really hard for me to accept that I had to relearn how to love a man who was different than the man I married, if that makes any sense. And it was hard for me. And I had a lot of animosity over having to do it. And so in the process of all that, I had a lot of anger and I had a lot of resentment and animosity. And so, it caused me to probably not be as nice to him as I should have, not to be as understanding and forgiving of him as I should have. A lot of times I thought about how it affected me. Like, this is not fair to me. Why did this happen to me? Why do I have to deal with these things? And I should have spent more time thinking about how this was affecting him, because he was struggling with it too. But let me tell you, PTSD is a family issue. It's not a person issue. It affects everybody in the whole house. And so looking back again, I see how I didn't really help things a lot of the times because I would get mad about him being mad and we'd fight about both of us being mad. And he'd get mad because he's like, I'm allowed to be mad. I'm allowed to have emotions. I'm a man. But it's how there's just so many things about it. So the point is that, and there was a few times when I thought about, could I stay married to him forever? And I thought about, would it be better if we were apart? And a few times I considered divorce, to be honest. I didn't file and, didn't make a whole lot of concrete plans, but I thought about, like, would my life be better or easier if I divorced him? Then I did think about him and his situation. And I thought, how shitty would that be that he goes to war to fight for our country and comes back broken and is trying his best to fix himself. And in the process of all that, his wife leaves him and takes his kids away from him. Like, how much more could he have gotten? How much more punishment could he have gotten for doing the right thing to protect his country? And I just couldn't do that to him. Like, I did think about him and I thought, and he was a dad, number one, first and foremost. He even said, I think God put me on this earth to be a dad. Like, that's my main calling in life. And I thought, how cruel of me for selfish reasons to take my children away from him and just have him be a part-time dad, and then struggle to try to make ends meet by myself and do everything by myself. And would it have really been my life really been better? And so there were times when I considered, like, is this even worth it? And it was, but I can't lie and say that my marriage was perfect because it wasn't. And then there's a lot of those things that went on at the end, like I said, with his health issues and me not knowing what was going on and probably did things that seemed like they were heartless or cruel. And it was just basically me trying to survive. I didn't take him to any of his chemo appointments. A lot of people are like, I can't believe you didn't take him. Well, he only had 3 and his mom wanted to take him. That was her way of, like, caring for him. I was the only person working in the house. I had to work, and she wanted to take him. I would have had to take off from work, and she wasn't working. So, and you know what? To be honest, I was probably in a lot of denial at that time. Like, taking him to a chemo appointment would have just been a stark reminder that he was dying right in front of my eyes. And maybe I just didn't want to have those thoughts in my head for that 3-hour period. I mean, you can blame me for it, I guess, and you can say how horrible it was that I didn't do it, but he did have somebody caring for him. His mother was taking him, and that's what she wanted to do, and he was okay with it. So, how I don't know. I don't know how to explain all that, but, like, I'm sure some of the things that I did while he was sick that seemed heartless was like a defense mechanism on myself, like not being able to handle the reality that he was dying. Like, I did not want to think about it. I didn't have a choice because he was right in front of me, dying in front of me, but, like, I didn't wanna think about it every single second of the day, so there probably was some times that I, had my mind on other things because it was a survival. I was working, I had a job to do, I had bills to pay, I had children to help raise. He was too sick to do it, so, like, so much was going on, and I had a lot of animosity, again, because my husband was dying. I didn't have animosity at him because he couldn't help it, you know what I mean? But, like, just animosity at the fact that here I am, I stayed with him and did all the things I was supposed to do, and yet I'm still having to do the single parent thing. I'm having to pay all the bills, I'm having to raise the kids by myself, and I have to do all these things, and it's hard not to be bitter, you know? And so, and it was hard, to not think about those things, like, the hard times that we had in our marriage. I don't have hard times in my marriage with him anymore because he's not around. And so, again, like I said, I wasn't relieved or anything that he died, but, um, there was just times where I'm like, and I hate to say this, but you ever, like, before your husband even passes away or your wife or whatever, sometimes when you get in really, really bad fights, you just think, you know, like, how would my life be different if we were divorced? Or how would my life be different if they died? Or would my life be different if I'd never married them in the first place? And there's just every once in a while you get like a what if thought in your head. Just like when you're a kid and you're like, how would my parents feel if I ran away? Then they'll really be sorry or whatever. Like you get those thoughts in your head. And then when you've had those fleeting thoughts sometimes and then your spouse gets sick and dies, you're like, holy crap. Like, I thought about that one time. Like, I didn't wish it, you know what I mean? But I just thought about, like, what would my life be like if he was not there? And then I felt horrible, horrible, horrible. Like, "Oh my gosh, did I wish that into action?" Like, I didn't really want that. I didn't really, I swear, I did not want it. But you can't help it because you just have those fleeting thoughts sometimes. I'm just being real with y'all, and if people wanna bash me over that one, I can't help it. Like, I'm a human person, and we have feelings and thoughts sometimes that we are ashamed of, and that's just something that happens, right? And that's something we have to reconcile within our heart and our mind. So, um, and then with JP, I don't want to speak a lot about his marriage and his wife because I never knew her and I know the situation. I know what he shared with me, but I don't. It's not my place to share a lot of his story and the details of his marriage. So I'm not going to really go to a lot of details. But I will say this: when we first got together, he was married to his wife for 33 plus years. And for a lot of those years, he had a really good marriage. And then towards the end, it was not as good because of unhealthy choices that were made and that affected his marriage. He had a lot of dysfunction in his marriage in the very end, the last several years, and it caused a lot of problems and issues. And he said that there was times when he thought about divorcing her because of how hard and dysfunctional the marriage had become. But he made promises to her. He cared about her. He loved her. He could not bring himself to leave her. And so he decided to stay, even though he wasn't getting what he needed out of the marriage at the very end. And so he sacrificed his own happiness and his own fulfillment because he was taking care of her and doing the things that she needed or she wanted and things like that. And so when she died, he also had that instant feeling of relief, and his feeling of relief was because of a lot of the dysfunctional issues were gone, and then he also had the guilt because she died, and so he had that same mix of guilt and relief, and when we first got together, almost all the memories that he would bring up about her were of traumatic, bad experiences that had happened in their marriage because those were the most fresh in his mind because they happened the very end of their marriage. And he would relive stories to me and tell me about the things she had done and things that had happened and that had bothered him and, just bad stuff. And I finally had to tell him, look, you were married to her for 33 years. And so I know that you did not have 33 years of those types of memories. I said, try to think of a good memory that you had in the past. And he was like, I can't do it. I can't because the good memories are farther back and they've been overshadowed by the bad stuff. So I had to encourage him to really just sit, and he had to force himself to go past the dysfunctional moments and go farther back into the past to find the good memories because they were there, but they were covered up and hidden. They weren't coming to the front of his mind automatically. He had to search for them. And so I would keep reminding him, think about a good time. Think about back then when your babies were young and she was that mom that you talked about. She was cooking and cleaning and keeping up and keeping them all dressed and like, being the little mama hen, mama duck that you talked about and how she was so overprotective of those kids because she was just, just a good mom. I said, think about those things and pull up those stories. And he finally made himself go back and pick those stories out. And now he will say, I'm so glad that you encouraged me to do that because all those good memories were like squished down by the other stuff. And to be honest, you don't really want to lie, but at the same time, when a person is gone, you know, how much good are you doing to yourself, to the family that they left behind, to your children? How much good are you doing to continue to relive the trauma and the dysfunction and the abuse and the bad things? Like you're not doing yourselves any favors. And so my advice would be it's okay if you're feeling those things. It's normal, it's common. And there's a lot of shame involved in those feelings and thoughts, and so we don't talk about it much. But it's okay to feel it. It's even okay to talk about it, but, people are probably gonna judge you over it, so talk about it in our Facebook group so other people can understand. But at the same time, at some point, it's time to lay those feelings, lay those memories to rest because they're not around anymore to defend themselves. They can't stand up for themselves. They don't even have a chance to, like, make up for the mistakes that they made anymore. And so at some point, it's time to, yeah, accept the fact that they were not perfect, but also accept the fact that now that they're gone, let's try to focus on the positive thoughts and the positive memories, even if we got to dig back a little farther to find them, and let that be their legacy, especially to their kids. Let that be what you carry forward is positive the good times, even if it's the early times, the positive things about them, their strengths, the things that made you smile, the things that made you fall in love with them to begin with. Was it their charm or their athleticism or their hard work or their wit or their intelligence or their work ethic or, their sense of humor, whatever it was that drew you to them in the first place, those aren't gone. You might not have new memories of those, but they're still back there in your memory too. So you have all this collection of old memories and about your marriage. You get to choose which one of those focus on in the past. And so you can't make the bad ones go away. And I'm not trying to say pretend like they didn't exist. I'm just saying if you're going to have to think about one of those memories, go back and think of a good one. And then let those bad things, let those mistakes, let those bad qualities that they might have had, just let them die with them. Just let them. The more you relive them in your head, the more fresh they're going to be in your memory. The best way to let them fade is to not give them any attention. And so, and I'm not saying, pretend like they were a saint. I'm not saying that. But I am just saying that, just try to focus on those good moments because I know you had them or you wouldn't have married them. And so, and just understand about yourself that it's okay to feel how you feel. It's okay to have those conflicting feelings. And it's totally normal to not think that your spouse was a saint and to still be okay with grieving their loss. And so I hope this was helpful to you. I hope this made you feel better. And feel free to put anything in the comments that you'd like. And if you'd like for it to be of a more private, in a more private environment, then feel free to join our Facebook group. And it does take me a week or two sometimes to get through all the approvals because sometimes I'm just that busy, and we've got about 40 people right now that are waiting to get approved. So I will go through those and try to get them approved and get y'all in there. I'm going to go through the last bit of comments, and then after that, we're going to wrap it up. Okay. Let's see. I had to go back a little bit. It's funny. Ginger says, it's funny how what you complain about is sometimes what you miss the most. Yeah, sometimes it's the funny, quirky things that you're like, oh my gosh, that man. And then you just remember that those are some of the things that you miss about him. Shell says, my husband had an upset stomach through the night before he died. He got me up 4 times to help him, and I was getting frustrated through lack of sleep. He died at 7 a.m. So, Shell, you totally get what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, at the moment, you don't know they're dying. And so you're like, can you please, I had 3 kids at home. I had to go up and get to work the next day and get them to school. And I wasn't trying to, drag my 3 kids out of bed at 2 a.m. and take them to the ER on a school night. But then later on, I'm like, dang, he had cancer and was dying and I didn't know. And like you said, I was like, I got to get some sleep. You can't be blamed for that. You had no idea. You are a human person and stomach aches happen a lot in a marriage, right? So let's see. I told him to sleep as he had been awake. I didn't mean for him to go. Took me ages to stop reliving that night and what I could have done better. And Shell, you couldn't have done anything better because you had no idea you had no idea. If you'd had the knowledge that you have now, of course you would have done something different, but you didn't. So you handled it the only way you knew how based on the information that you had at the time. And that's all you can do. Doug had motor neuron disease, but had been quite stable until he caught a viral infection. The end happened too quick, but my initial thought was relief he wasn't suffering anymore. Yeah, that's a normal thing too. You feel relief, then you feel guilt, then it goes back and forth. Janet says, my husband was in Vietnam before we were married. As he got older, more and more. I think it picked up. I think it cut off. Ginger says, none of us knew that the last moment would be the last moment. You can't change what you thought and felt at the time. That's right. Annika says, Shell Marie, my husband also died due to motor neuron disease, ALS. I was also, first of all, relieved when he died so that he did not have to suffer any longer. Lucinda says, yes, right there with you. How am I going to live with this man another 30 years? But no, I didn't really mean it. Like, wait, I take it back. Hold on. Untimes. Right. So, Annika says, MND or ALS sucks. My beautiful, strong husband became a shell of himself. Yeah, that happens too with cancer and all those diseases. You just see them waste away. It is very, very hard to watch that happen. ALS is one of the worst. My husband was Mr. Fix-It. He helped everyone before he got paralyzed. It was hard for him to I lost my place. It was hard for him to not be able to do anything to help. Yeah, that is tough, especially for a man, I think, who was like the guy who took care of everything. That's tough, for them to lose that identity. Shell says, absolutely. I used to see the sadness in his eyes when I took the dogs out for a walk because that was his thing before his legs went. Nancy says, at Mom's Day, the kids were talking about some issues. LH had said, I responded, it was not his fault. He could not help it because of how he was programmed as a kid because his dad had PTSD. His dad was in World War II and Korean. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing we can do about how we act based on the information we have at the time. Right. And so we just do the best that we can do. After my husband passed away, I found some unpleasant things on his phone. I found rest in knowing that he was only human, but he was still a child of God. Nobody's perfect. Well, that sounds like, that has got to be tough. And sounds like you are handling it with some grace through the grace of God, because that's about the only way we can do that. Right. And Ginger says, thank you so much, Leo. You've been a big help to me. Randy is the reason I now watch you, and I'm glad he sent me one of your videos. Have a great day. So, and I appreciate all of you coming in and checking in. I've seen a lot of new faces today, so I'm kind of glad to see that. Annika says, thank you, Leo, for starting this channel. It has helped me super much since I found this channel in Fresh Grief about 1.5 years ago. Your channel is one that I always go back to. So that definitely makes it easier for me to continue, because it's really hard with my job sometimes to get videos in. I used to do once a week. Now I'm like, gosh, I'm lucky to do once a month. So hopefully the summer will be a little better, but I do, it does help me feel better to know that whatever I'm doing is helping other people. And like I said, that is my therapy. So, and I tried to make it under an hour, and look at that. I just went over the hour mark. So hopefully my pizza's upstairs ready to eat. Okay. Well, if you're catching this later on, then post any comments that you'd like below in the comment section. Again, make sure that you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and see you in the Facebook group. And we'll see you next time, hopefully in the next week or two. All right. Bye, guys.